Well, welcome everyone. I'm Linda Sechrist, president of the Southwest Florida Reset Center in Fort Myers. On behalf of the Reset Center members who are with us today, thank you for joining us. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, our center is located on the beautiful 12-acre campus of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Fort Myers. Our facilities sharing agreement with UUCFM affords us the opportunity to provide facilities and space for future demonstration projects that advance the common goals we share with others who are now acting and advocating for the environment. A good example is our upcoming collaborative project with the Florida Gulf Coast University students who will be creating a food forest on the property. And you'll be hearing about more of that later with Alex, one of our speakers. Our name RESET is an acronym for Restorative, Ecological, Social, Economic, and Transformational Education. Think of us as a hub of a bioregion consisting of 5 Southwest Florida counties, as a hub for bringing together organizations, groups, and individuals such as all of you are here today. We offer you opportunities as well as facilities to come together with us to specifically address the root causes of harmful environmental policies and practices. We provide the visibility and organizational means to collectively raise your public prominence and enhance your potential to be the agents of change you seek to be by encouraging collaborative action in setting common goals for creating long-term restorative, ecological, social, economic, and transformative systemic solutions that are for the greater common good. Our outreach programs, such as our September 16th forum on the rights of nature and the right to clean water, responded to the urgent need to help Orange County turn their right to clean water charter amendment into law on November 3rd. Like our September 16th program, today's program on regenerative agriculture seeks to raise awareness, increase visibility, and encourage public commitment to bringing about a healthy and thriving Southwest Florida for all of us to enjoy. It's time to reset our relationship with the earth and with one another. So now I'll turn this over to Ted Brown. Ted?
Well, welcome to all of you. It's such a pleasure to be part of this group. My job was to be the person who introduced our first panelist, Van Ellison, who's the CEO and president of St. Matthew's House in Naples. Van, unfortunately, is unable to be on the program today. So on very short notice, we have instead Peter Johnson, who is the vice president for development from St. Matthew's House, to talk to us about the wonderful things that are going on in St. Matthew's House with respect to food. It's a story that I found interesting from the very beginning, and I'm so happy that we're going to have somebody here to talk to us about all the things that they do to produce their own food, to share that food with others, and we'll later on get into the subject of distribution and food justice as well.
Well, you know, I think the exciting thing about the Reset group is how we got together. It was just a small group of about 10 of us who had some interactions with Paul Hawken and his book Drawdown and a series of workshops that were happening around it. And this eclectic group of about 10 of us kind of connected. I've been at this for a lot of years and got very excited with the kind of dialogue and the backgrounds that the folks have that have been the champions of the Reset group. And we talked over what we could do. We've all been activists our whole careers, most of us from national and international right down to local grassroots kinds of activities and social justice and all sorts of environmental initiatives. And we came up with the idea of maybe we don't want to continue being the ones trying to be out there trying to make things happen politically, but maybe at this point in our lives, what we'd have to offer is a tremendous number of connections and insight that we've gained over the years. And we decided that maybe we could be some kind of a facilitator of helping groups throughout Southwest Florida find out more about topics that they have interest in. And we could bring speakers in and we could create a program here at the Universalist Church. They already have a facility that's just phenomenal with a big hall and meeting rooms and an office possibility for us. Already have raised bed gardens and just a beautiful facility that could be a course center that could be the place we facilitate bringing groups together. So we all have contacts in Southwest Florida. Let's talk to some of the leaders in different organizations and institutions and see whether they think an idea like that might be worthwhile. We found that people were interested in seeing us maybe try to put together and facilitate bringing groups together to share ideas and share resources. And as we looked at the issues that were right in front of us that interested us, but also interested others, three things came up. The first one was the campaign for rights of nature had gained some foothold here in Lee County with a strong group working on that initiative. And then the initiative out of Orange County made it on the ballot for rights of nature. It made us think maybe we can help Orange County, and that if we could help Orange County with their initiative, it would help us here with rights of nature in Lee County. So we put together the first of our series of Zoom calls with over 40 people participating, and it brought a lot of attention to the rights of nature initiative, but it also was so successful in that Orange County passed overwhelmingly the rights of nature and set a precedent that's going to be useful for all of us, with the hope that we might see some things happen in various towns and cities in Southwest Florida. We wanted to focus on two things in Southwest Florida: sea level rise and climate change. And the human aspects that have caused those things can be reversed. So if we could reset the way we're doing business in Southwest Florida on environmental matters and matters of social justice, we can make a difference. As Paul Hawkins' book indicated, it is possible to reset the climate initiative and global warming trend within the next 30 years or less. And that's a positive thing for us to focus ourselves on. The second initiative that we looked at that we all had an interest in is agriculture. Soils are the lifeblood of all food on this planet, and how we treat that soil and how we grow things in that soil and how we distribute food is critical. So this is the first of what we see as a series of agricultural Zoom calls. We wanted to start with some of the grassroots growers that are providing food either through distribution in boxes that go all the way from Bradenton and to Naples and beyond that even, that are being grown right here in Southwest Florida. The things like St. Matthew's House and growers that are growing food for people in our region and then distributing that food. So our three main speakers today are focused on those kind of topics, and they're exciting. And then the third one that I've been involved with for years is resilience ecology. We put together about 15 people who are extremely knowledgeable about ecological systems and planning systems in Southwest Florida. And we think we can retool and reset many of the ecological trends that have been happening. So that's what put this little group we have together. The forum became seeing ourselves as a hub that can provide resources for others. And one of our members, Fred Moon, set up the Climate Action Fund in the Southwest Florida Community Foundation and has been given small grants for initiatives on climate change and warming. So let me turn it over to Peter and we'll take a look at agriculture in Southwest Florida. And Peter, you kick us off.
Great. Well, St. Matthew's House, with the help of many donors, including your group, has started a pretty robust agriculture program. As you all know, we serve primarily folks who are struggling with poverty and homelessness and addiction. And we see agriculture as a really therapeutic way to help give people a sense of purpose and a feeling of productiveness in a way that they probably couldn't do in a lot of programs that serve these populations. So Van Ellison started an agriculture program out in LaBelle first, and the idea was for us to be able to produce about 70% of our vegetables. What we found is that the agriculture offers residents an alternative to classroom learning. They can learn about the creator through creation in a way that engages all their senses, whether it's with bees. We now have bees out there. We had hydrostackers, which was the biggest expense of our agriculture project. We have chickens, we have goats. In this way, the folks in our program can engage with nature in a way that they hadn't before. The structure of the agriculture program complements the men's and women's recovery programs in unique ways. The ladies work at least 3 times a week caring for farm, land, and livestock on the property. They're assigned chores. They feed chickens. They supervise compost worms. They compost. They water the herb garden or greenhouse areas. And there's a moringa grove with fruit trees, raised beds, garden herbs. At one point, I think they had as many as 20 egg-laying chickens. And then we have dairy goats to add to all of that. The men are in Alva, Florida, involved 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, doing gardening chores with the hydro stackers. They have worm bins, raised beds, tropical trees, macadamia orchard, and they've harvested enough macadamias to begin selling some of them at farmers markets. And then just most recently, we installed a bunch of hydro stackers in the parking lot of our property here on Airport Road, right next to our shelter, a homeless shelter here in Naples. And that's exciting because that was all blacktop before, and it was not being used to even park cars. And now it's about an acre of hydro stackers there. And so the goal will be to be able to grow fruits and vegetables to supplement the soup kitchen programs that we have, the various food ministries that we have. And we also have a new full-service restaurant. So part of St. Matthew's House focus from the very beginning has been to give people skills that are marketable for jobs. And we've had a catering company way back in 2004 when our CEO, Van Ellison, came in. The food was terrible in our shelter, but he couldn't afford an executive chef. So he thought about it a little bit. He said he's got a kitchen and he was going to start a catering company in order that he could use the revenue from that to hire an executive chef. That also gives jobs to our people. And so we have a catering company, and now it's become a full-service restaurant on South Airport Road right next to our homeless shelter. And the full-service restaurant gives our folks the opportunity to do back-of-the-house and front-of-the-house stuff for restaurant industry. And those are really marketable skills. And so when we put the hydro stackers in here down at 2601 Airport Road, we were able to harvest directly from the hydro stackers, bring it right to the restaurant to either be served in mission meals at the soup kitchens or in the restaurant itself, which is really marketable because, as you all know, fresh produce is a great thing to be able to talk about when you're serving food in restaurants. So that's sort of the size and scope. We're not at the point where we're 70, Van would like to say 100% of our produce is produced out of our gardens. We're not at that point yet, but we have hired Sharon Weingarten, who I believe is on this call. He's a PhD plant science guy from the University of Florida, and he continues to oversee our various agriculture programs. And with his help, we're going to get to that 70% mark. The hope is to be able to grow our own food and also teach people how to grow their own food on a small scale. We want people to be able to leave our programs and not only find meaningful job and work, but be able to garden for themselves for their own consumption at some point.
Thank you so much. That was really enlightening and an incredible example of how we can grow food to help others and teach them to grow it at the same time. So Bill Hammond is very briefly going to introduce Eva to us, Eva Worden.
It's very hard to introduce Eva and her partner, Chris, 2 PhDs that came down to Florida and worked on a dream of getting a piece of land and starting an organic production system. I saw the piece of land they got up in Charlotte County, and it was a beat up old orange grove where the trees were way past prime. And in a few years, they were able to get that soil built up and certified as organic and began their production with that innovative system of box subscriptions. Chris is a great tinkerer. I'm amazed every time I went there and saw another tractor he bought and adapted for some special purposes on the farm. And Eva carved out a whole series of niches, including when we got vegetable boxes, we didn't know what half of the things in it were or how to cook them. And so Eva put recipes in. And then finally, people kept asking, well, how can I can and so on? So she put a whole teaching system on the farm. I could go on and on with all the innovations, and they've gotten national awards for their work as outstanding leaders in producing organic food and distributing them all the way from St. Pete farmer markets down to Naples. She's also politically motivated. It wasn't too long ago she testified at the House Select Committee on Sustainability and Climate Change up in St. Pete. So Eva, I'd like you to jump in and tell us your story.
Hi, everyone. What an honor to be introduced by the great Bill Hammond. And just that you know that and that you're witness to my journey is really inspiring to me. This farm, Worden Farm, is out on Vermont Road, which is County Road 74 that runs east-west from Highway 17 to Highway 31. So if you have visited the Babcock Webb Wildlife Management Area, we are on the northernmost section of that, just across the street from it. And if you go a mile further north, Shell Creek is right there. Shell Creek is the water supply for the city of Punta Gorda. And we steward this land with great understanding of our footprint and our impact in this larger ecosystem. And we get to witness every day, because we live in a little house right in the middle of it, the swallowtail kites when they arrive from South America, or the bald eagles, or, all of the bird life that migrates, as well as, bobcats and the wildflowers in our pine flatwoods forest area, and seeing the alligators as they go around sniffing out bodies of water. So we really have this wonderful place that we can live, and we work really hard to be able to be here. We are very focused on productivity at the farm. So, we have been feeding hundreds of families every season in this area since 2003, when we started the farm. And the way that we do it is we sign people up for the season, and it's in the community supported agriculture model. We deliver boxes to various locations around the area, as well as have an on-farm pickup. And we also do farmers markets in Sarasota and St. Pete. We used to do markets in Naples as well, and in Sanibel. It got to be where we were doing 6 farmers markets a week. I had 2 toddlers and running the farm and everything else, education program. It just got to be a lot. So we pulled back a bit on some of the farmers markets, but the box program is actually something that many people have been members for years and years. And we've partnered with the Mother Earth Natural Food Stores, and down in Naples, there's Juicelation is a delivery site this season, and then the Richards Foodporium stores to the north. So these are stores with basically a similar customer as ours, because we are certified organic, and the people who are very health conscious that might shop at a place like that would also be our customers. So we deliver these boxes that people have prepaid for. And what that does for us economically is it provides us with the stability for the season, where we don't need to have as much risk. There's so much risk in farming, especially in vegetable farming. And especially now with the climate situation, it's getting even worse. This has been, we have the driest September we've ever had. It's been a very hot year. There are extreme weather events that we've had them in the past, as we've been farming here for these decades, but it does seem to be getting more extreme, and the predictions that we read about, we also see. So we do practice climate friendly farming in terms of having like cover crops every summer, using what would otherwise be organic waste as fertilizer, trying to select for varieties that are not requiring of great amounts of inputs, that are more pest resistant or don't require as much water, using micro irrigation whenever possible in order to reduce the amount of fresh water that we use, and therefore also reduce the amount of pumping that we have to do and fuel associated with that. We adapt tractors, we have our solar powered weeders and things like that. And we recognize that agriculture does have a footprint. It's not wildland, but then in this day and age, every ecosystem has had an impact from humanity. And so we all need to eat. And whatever you just ate for lunch and whatever you'll eat for dinner, it was either foraged or farmed. And somebody did that, and you have the ability to influence how the land is stewarded and also how the people are treated when you're making your food decisions. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here around that. But You know, as far as this whole group, I only have had conversations with Bill and then with Joseph yesterday, so I don't know a lot about what we might do and how I might be able to contribute. But the farm is a wonderful venue, and in the past, you know, pre-pandemic, of course, it was different, where we would have weekly, practically like a big veggie party where everyone would come and get their vegetables and kids would play and we would have workshops. And, you know, I'm sure everyone misses all those kinds of events. But going forward, our place is a wonderful venue that's available for activities. We have a nice big pole barn and big parking area, and the Unitarian Church has been a delivery site as well in the past, and I have gone and spoken at the gardens. Milissa was a site host back then, and when Milissa was getting started with the gardens. So yeah, what a beautiful facility with lots of potential there too. So thanks for letting me share about what we do, and really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva. I, for many years, was a member and have really appreciated and hope to join back up next year. It is really an honor for me to be able to introduce our next speaker to you. I'm Maria Rocca. I am on the Reset Board, and I'm the chair of the Department of Integrated Studies at Florida Gulf Coast University, which is the home of our permaculture courses as well as FGCU's Food Forest. Alex Nikesch, our next speaker, is the owner and lead designer of Edulis Designs. He's passionate about building regenerative communities and culture. While living abroad in China, he was exploring more sustainable ways of organizing society, and he discovered permaculture. Alex studied living examples of permaculture at work in traditional Chinese rural farms and urban gardens while he was establishing his own guerrilla gardens and food forests in the mountains of Fujian. Alex also helped to build the first Earthship in China, which resides in Panyu, Guangzhou. He later studied permaculture design at the Permaculture Research Institute in Australia. After Alex moved back to the United States, he played an important role in establishing the Southwest Florida Permaculture Guild. And as I mentioned, Alex is currently teaching permaculture at Florida Gulf Coast University, where we actually now, thanks to him, offer a permaculture certification. He is organizing for the Southwest Florida Permaculture Guild, hosting workshops, and helping people design their properties with his company, Edulis Designs. He's also developing his own quarter-acre property as an example of what can be done on a small suburban lot instead of just planting a lawn. And so it is my privilege to be able to introduce Alex Nikesch.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for having me. It's such a wonderful pleasure to be with y'all today. So basically, I want to keep this short and sweet and talk a bit about what I do at FGCU, a bit about permaculture in the COVID context, and what we can all do to build a more regenerative culture at large. So for those of you who might not be familiar with what permaculture is, it is a design science rooted in ethics for regenerative human settlements. And the ethics that we make our design decisions from are very important, which are earth care, care of the earth, the systems we design benefit the ecosystems they reside in, people care, which is basically we take good care to make sure everyone involved with these systems has right livelihood. There's no exploitation of labor in any of these systems. And then the third ethic is share of surplus or fair share. So you take voluntarily your surplus time and resources and you give them back to earth and people. And sometimes a fourth ethic is mentioned, which is called the transition ethic. So there's two parts to that. One, we're in transition as a society at large, and we still have access to a wealth of non-renewables. And the most appropriate way to use these resources is in the establishment of long-term systems that do not need them. An example would be using an excavator to build a dam in a bioregion that's appropriate, where it could last for up to 100 or maybe thousands of years. Another aspect of the transitional ethic is we are all kind of on this journey together, and we try to be gentle with ourselves and others as far as not pointing the finger and being more sustainable than thou. It's very important. So permaculture as a response to the systems we see, it's very positive. So we're looking to basically design the world we want, not fight against the world we don't want. So it's like the old Buckminster Fuller quote, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model, which makes the existing model obsolete. So in the design course I teach, the culmination is a design project where the students work on the homestead in Southwest Florida. And anybody at large that's interested in a free permaculture design for the students to work on, let me know. I'll give you my contact information. So there's 6 design projects each semester. So we could get 6 lucky homesteaders to have a free design. And the goal of the design course basically isn't to train future professional permaculture designers, although that they will have the tool sets to do that, but basically to give them design literacy that they can take with them for the rest of their lives and live more regeneratively regardless of whatever context they find themselves in. So that's the permaculture design course. It's one half of the certification. The other half is the forest gardening course. Like Maria mentioned, we have a forest garden on campus. It is the oldest, most mature, and most impressive permaculture demonstration site of any U.S. campus, in my opinion, my humble opinion. So it's a half acre, dozens of different tropical fruit trees and shrubs and perennial vegetables. It's open to the public from dawn to dusk, so do check that out. Forest gardening in general, real quick, I want to just explain this in a nutshell. It is a human-guided forest ecology modeled off the patterns found in nature. So the patterns I'm talking about are both spatial and temporal. Spatial meaning if you ever go into a forest and you see there are layers of vegetation. There's a canopy, there's an understory, there's a shrub layer, there's a herbaceous layer. There are plants growing along the ground, there's ground covers. So we model our systems based on this architecture. And as far as temporal, the patterns we see in nature, in most ecologies, if left alone, they go through a process of ecological succession through disturbance to a climax forest. So we design species into these systems to model off of that progression. Forest garden is a multi-strata forestry, agroforestry system. Agroforestry is agriculture with woody perennials, usually tree crops, but annuals could be put in there too. Multi-strata agroforestry systems have been documented out of any agricultural system to sequester the most carbon. So the record holder is actually a cacao agroforestry system in the Philippines that's been documented to sequester 40 tons per hectare per year of carbon. So we really need to perennialize our agricultural systems and move towards these. These are amazing systems that can provide fuel, fodder, fiber, pharmaceuticals, fertilizer, and fun, of course. So the culmination of the forest garden course is essentially another design project, but this is usually a community-focused project where the students design a forest garden for a community organization, this semester being the Reset Center, hence the reason why I'm here and involved with the Reset Center folks who are amazing. And so anyone who's involved with any other community organizations moving forward who would like some free forest garden designs, please feel free to reach out about that. We love having an impact with these courses. So we're training the future leaders of this regenerative culture movement and having an impact in our bioregion at the same time, which is great. So moving on, I want to talk just briefly about the context we're all in. We're on Zoom. We're not meeting in person for the obvious reason with COVID. So if we're going to take a permaculture approach to looking at this situation, well, first thing you would do is observe. So let's observe the patterns of this new normal. And if we are fortunate enough to have a home still over our head in our health, we can take an approach of looking at the patterns where we're basically more home-based, which is a problem for a lot of folks. We're not used to this, but there is a permaculture principle called the problem is the solution. So within each problem or challenge is embedded a solution for growth, for being able to become more regenerative if we look at it. So what I see it as is a potential to revitalize the household economy. So over the last 50 so years, a lot of economic activity has moved from the household economy to the monetary economy, whether that's food production, child care, babysitters and whatnot, whether it's just buying things more often instead of mending it. So we can each take this challenge to become more resilient and more regenerative by revitalizing the household economy, growing a bit of your own food, pickling your food, fermenting, raising animals if you can, supporting local agriculture. It's very important. So this is essentially called disintermediation, which is the process of removing the middleman from the equation. So just a few kind of points to mention before I yield my time is what we need to do is start where we are. That's essential in any permaculture solution. We work locally, give locally and creatively. It's not financial, it's not the only way to give. You can give time and expertise. There's an old permaculture saying, it's not who I am in my community, but how I function. What kind of role can we have in building a more regenerative world? And that's kind of a good question to leave everybody with, is how can we live our lives as a sort of beautiful gesture moving towards a more regenerative world that we all know in our hearts is possible. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Alex. That was so inspiring. And I like it that you left us with those questions to ponder. Our last speaker, last but certainly not least, is my dear friend, Milissa Bell. It's really a great pleasure that I get to introduce her to you. I've known Milissa for many years. We used to sing together in an a cappella singing group called Women Folk, and we had lots of fun doing that. But Melissa's passion since the day I met her has always seemed to be gathered around seeds and dirt. She's a woman of many talents. When I first met Milissa, she was growing food in her little yard. I think it was in Dean Park, wasn't it, Milissa? And teaching permaculture and gardening now has become Melissa's passion and her calling. And over the last decade, people have begun calling Milissa the unruly gardener. So Milissa is a Florida native. She's an organic gardener. She's a permaculturalist. She's a seed saver and self-sufficiency enthusiast. She cultivates edible and medicinal plants. She raises chickens, ducks, rabbits, worms, and bees in Southwest and also now in North Central Florida up in Swanee. She and her husband, Santiago, they run 2 organic farms called Dos Abejas Farms. So without any further ado, I give you the floor, Milissa. Let's hear from you, what you've been up to.
Wow, I walk among giants here. It's amazing to see these people that have been all part of my journey. Starting with FGCU, I went to FGCU long before they had a cool permaculture program to get involved in, but I did have Peter Corcoran and Wynn Abraham and Bill Hammond as huge inspirations in my life. And back then I was just gardening as just kind of something cool. I liked medicinal herbs. I thought it was something neat to do. But through the program, the environmental studies program I went through there with these guys, agriculture was a big issue. It was talked about as a big issue in terms of our ecological effects on the world. It really got me thinking about my own eating habits and how food's produced and all of these things. So I basically threw myself into learning how can I produce things more sustainably myself and change my own eating habits, my own eating patterns, and where I buy things from. And then in 2009, I think it was, I took a 15-week hands-on course with Frank Oakes, who is now deceased, but was another one of my inspirations. And he taught us, how to take it to a larger level as far as growing your own. And then he also encouraged all of us to go out there and teach everybody else how to grow their own as well. So the very next year, that's exactly what I did, thanks to the Unitarian Universalist Church, where I had the privilege of working for 15 years, where I got to meet Eva Worden, who also inspired me because she was giving talks there at the time. And I got to eat her good food for many years and enjoyed it. And then Eva also came and talked at one of the classes we gave. So that was my first attempt at teaching. I didn't know a lot. It was just, I knew what I had been taught already. So I just wanted to share what I had been taught. So I turned around and basically ended up teaching 70 people a 15-week hands-on course over 2 different seasons. And all of those people, I still talk to a lot of those people today, and they're still gardening on their own home urban scale. So that kind of gave me the ideas just to continue trying to inspire other people to grow their own. At the time, there weren't organic seedlings, and seeds were really hard to come by, not so much anymore. So I started growing organic seeds and seedlings for market and took those to market while I was learning beekeeping, while I was learning about raising my chickens and ducks and all of these things. And I also took a permaculture design course at the Unitarian Universalist Church with one of the designers of the FGCU food forest, Erica Clough. And it's just been a journey really since then of just as often as I can, I give as many garden talks as I can, trying to teach people that one, you can buy local and all of that, but you can also produce quite a bit right there on your own small, tiny bit of land. Throughout that, I've been kind of drawn into other projects. Shangri-La Springs and Bonita pulled me in and wanted me to design their gardens there. So I had fun doing that because they really wanted to have a seed to table program. And then my husband and I, also thinking about global warming and the fact that we live on Pine Island, which is only about 5 feet above sea level, decided we needed to have a backup plan for our farm, our small farm on Pine Island. So we have purchased 8 acres in Suwannee County, which is 50 feet above sea level, and a completely different ecological system than the one I've been raised here, and one I learned even more about because of the likes of Win Abraham and Bill Hammond. So up there, what I'm trying to do is I've had some experiences with a lot of permaculture, is clearing their land to design their food forest. So and my land up there is mostly forested, except for about 2 of the 8 acres. So my goal is to experiment with permaculture while maintaining some of the ecological naturalness that's still there, because there is a lot of rural natural Florida up there where it hasn't been cleared for cow pastures and hay farms and all of that. There's still a lot of forest up there. So I'm hoping to learn what I can about what the possibilities are of working with nature and without clearing too much while preserving what I can. And now I've just been pulled into a aquaponics farm here in Fort Myers. So I bounce back and forth. It's quite chaotic. I'm onto an aquaponics farm who is very interested in sustainability. Alex, there's an opportunity for you because they have 10 acres in the heart of Fort Myers, one of the last 10-acre parcels that's still zoned ag. And they are utilizing probably a quarter of it for the aquaponics portion, but they have a whole back wet area. They are on a creek that could potentially be turned into a nice food forest. They do have some trees here. This is actually where I'm talking to you guys from right now. So they do have some trees here, but they have a lot of potential. I've just been brought in to kind of guide them on some other plants they could produce sustainably using their aquaponic system and just guide them a little bit about that. So basically my goal is just keep learning. I'm still a beginner, even though I've been doing this for a little over 10 years now. I'm a beginner in my eyes. And I just constantly am in awe and inspired by how much the conversation around food has changed, especially in this area, and how many people are trying to grow, how many people are trying to farm. And I'm just going to keep doing that. And that's all I have for you guys.
Thank you so much, Milissa. We had some time set aside to have a little general conversation between the panelists about some of the issues that seem to cross between the various operations that we heard spoken of.
I can speak from my experience at, like, when I was at Shangri-La Springs the first year I produced there, they didn't actually have a kitchen open yet. And so I produced about 6,000 pounds of food that they didn't have an outlet for yet. But what we encountered was that we tried to give it to some food banks, and the food banks at the time were not in a position to handle the fresh produce. So that's one of the situations we ran into there. I think that's changed now. But as far as outlets, the food banks are a huge one. The farmers markets are another one that if you're not selling it, just give it away. Just take it to a farmer's market and give it away. On my farm, I don't have a lot of waste because everything ends up becoming compost. Anything we don't eat is either fed to one of our creatures or we compost it. So we don't really have that problem on our place, but we're small scale.
What would you like to say about regulation? As far as state regulations, are they an impediment to you or do they help you? What is your relationship with the state of Florida with respect to that sort of thing?
The only area that I found regulations to be an issue more like in the meat area. We raise rabbits and chickens for meat as well as the eggs. But that's not something that I can feasibly afford to go through the process of what they would require for me to be able to sell that locally. And so I find that a big impediment. As far as the vegetables, again, we're smaller scale. We go to farmers markets. We haven't had any major regulation blocks in that respect. But I would say small scale meat production is probably one of the biggest regulation blocks because everything needs to go through this mass production in order to be able to be feasible.
So when it comes to waste, I guess you could say being like really compost focused and that kind of thing. I look at it like it can always go back to the earth. We prefer that its highest and best use is toward feeding people first and then animals and then microbes. But definitely trying to keep food out of a landfill is desirable. You know, there is the economics of it. If money didn't exist, we would invent it, of course, but it's a necessary part of our world. But I really liked what Alex had said about to revitalize the household economy. There's so much work that is devalued or not valued. Labor has money associated with it in our society. And wasting time is the greatest waste of them all. You know, heaven forbid we waste time, because that's all any of us have, right?
Yes.
And yet we're all just blips. But the labor cost is a real factor in agricultural production. And if you're talking about food waste, you don't want to waste the labor. You don't want to waste efforts. You don't want to waste resources. And of course, all the labor and resources that have gone into creating food, you don't want to waste that food. And you want to feed people whenever you can, right? So one piece of it is be open to rethinking economics, really. If you're talking about resetting, a big part of it is about a recognition of externalities in our current monetary system. It's about a recognition of what really is valuable, what really is important. And to obviously we live within this system but yet we created it. So I could go on a whole riff about economics that might be way beyond the scope, but just to keep it brief, we want to really all recognize where we can have an influence on true value. And when we are called upon to make decisions, to really consider that. And then with regard and the nitty gritty right now with where we are today, I would say the state rules about fresh cut vegetables would be considered an impediment to utilizing fresh produce to create value added product. So what I mean by that is, again, the input of labor and the domestic world of taking the time to chop up, let's say the Seminole pumpkin, great example, okay? Do anyone know what Seminole pumpkin is? Have you ever grown it and eaten it? I know some of you have. All right, so that is sort of intimidating to a lot of people, believe it or not. If you eat it all the time, you wouldn't be, but many people look at it and they just get scared, or they'll sit and they'll stare at it for a while on their table. And really you need to put the knife in it, and then, you know, you need to cut it up and take the seeds out. And it's not going to a drive-through and getting a sandwich and eating it on your way to somewhere else. You know, there's an involvement with that. So if you have a bunch of those and people aren't buying them because no one knows what to do with them, and yet they're very nutritive, high in all kinds of great phytochemicals and vitamins and everything, we want to get that into the food system and into people's bellies, right? So what is the obvious way of dealing with that? It's to have vegetable butchering, right? Have it prepared. And, you know, you can go to Publix and you'll see some of the people, and even regionally, some people are doing that. They're doing fresh cut. Well, those are very popular because a lot of people are working jobs and raising families, and they don't have time to engage with an hour of food prep. So yeah, I would say we do need to protect health and wellness of the public, but there are regulations that, you know, in order for us here at Worden Farm, or for Milissa, if she has extra produce, or anyone who's growing, to actually butcher veggies and add that value of maybe an extra $1 a pound for the service and the labor input of it and make it worthwhile, we would probably all need to spend, you know, at least $70,000 to $100,000 to set up a commercial kitchen. And yes, there are some places where you can rent a kitchen space, but that isn't always viable. So yeah, I would say that's a regulation that, you know, if you could get people trained, that would be great, you know, to be able to cut and butcher veggies and make them available.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's an interesting point. That's the kind of thing that we might very well draw a group together at the center to talk about, that sort of issue for people that are in your situation. And we hope that we can find enough names of people growing food like you and Milissa and many others, I'm sure, that we can bring together to talk about issues like that. Some of them seem sort of mundane, but on the other hand, they're the kind of things that can make the difference between a smooth operation and a jerky one. Well, thank you for that comment. Anybody else among the panelists want to comment about any of the presentations?
I'll try. It's really noisy right now in my house, but people in any culture get the food system they deserve if they're not involved in some sort of meaningful way. So there needs to be a value change in the way people perceive their food, and local needs to be up on a pedestal, almost maybe higher than organic. The embodied energy in food should be accounted for, the transportation costs and whatnot. And probably impediments for what I do, I would love to see a change in the gray water ordinances. It is currently illegal to plumb gray water out of the home to the landscape. And that is something that's very progressive and pretty much what should be standard. There should be a standard to plumb your gray water out in a responsible way.
Okay, it sounds like you're getting sort of drowned out there, Alex. Thanks. Anybody else want to make any comments?
I just had 2 comments. When you asked about food waste, one way that we reduce waste is actually I love to go eat at the shelter the day after our catering company has a catering gig. So we go out and we'll serve a high-end party in Naples, and then everything that's left over, because there's always overages of food, we serve that at the shelter. And those are always the best eating days. You'll get excellent food on those days. So that's one way we reduce waste. I did talk about the compost bins that we have. And then when you asked about regulation, zoning is a big problem for us. It was hard for us to get the hydrostackers in down here on Airport Road. Collier County is pretty serious about doing parking studies if you reclaim asphalt, and that's great for the environment. Unfortunately, the zoning people don't like it so much. So that's always our challenge, no matter what we do, zoning, but that was particularly challenging with the latest project that we had.
Yeah.
A couple of things did pop up in the chat box already, questions about hydrostackers and what they really are. What does that really mean? Maybe you, Alex, or someone on the panel can tell us exactly what does that mean, hydrostacker.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure joining all of you. I have started as the ag manager for St. Matthew's House about 2 months ago, so I'm still relatively new. But the hydrostacker is a patented system that gentleman Chester Bullock started a number of years ago. And from what the story he told me, the inspiration came from the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. And basically, it's just a vertical hydroponic system. So your overall footprint, you know, a typical commercial farming, you're planting in the ground and everything's spread out. So your yield per square foot is decreased. And basically you have to have separate tanks for an acid and then also a nutrient fertilizer solution. It depends what you're growing, you would tweak your fertilizer analysis. It's a sophisticated system, but we've had success with it.
Thank you. When I'm listening to your words, I'm also thinking about smart growth management of population, and talking about building up instead of out. And it sort of has that same picture to me in my mind. I've received another question in the chat. I don't know if all of you saw it. And I think this question might be for you mostly, Eva, but we're wondering, how has the COVID pandemic affected your farming business?
Hi, yes, thank you. Well, it is a challenge. You know, I used to spend many hours of every week in season surrounded by hundreds of people, if not thousands, at the farmers markets and at the farm pickup of the vegetables. And so that sharply ended in March, and we're back at the farmers markets now. They're very different. They're much smaller, and we really have looked to the organic veggie boxes as the way forward for the farm for this time period. Because this is something that we have already been doing for many years, it is just an expansion of one area. And I think that we happened to make lemonade out of it and pivoted very quickly, and we're able to continue providing to the members of our community. Even in Sarasota and St. Pete, we do drive pickups of the boxes, and that has really worked out well for people that are eating our food who want to reduce their exposure but still get the experience of the produce and the connection with the local farm. I can say the internet has made it possible, of course, the internet's making this call possible. And I think that the internet is super important to recognize as far as climate impact. When I was on the call with the House Select Committee on climate change, and we were having a conversation with people from all over the country, I noted that we have much less of a climate footprint than we would have had we not been in this situation. And so where possible, to have influence in investing in broadband access to rural areas, it's important. I mean, we are out in a location that probably all of you are on some kind of a broadband high-speed internet connection. I'm using a Verizon Jetpack because I'm out in the middle. I'm actually using my phone to make a connection. And I know that just sounds very mundane, but were it not for the internet, we would not be able to connect to the thousands of people that are sustaining this property in this model of stewardship. I also feel that it has been like not just for us, but for everyone, you know, a recalibration and an opportunity to understand what truly is essential. And the recognition of local food security that we've been talking about for decades now is finally understood when all of a sudden people realize they can't get food at the grocery store. That's when our longtime farm members really had that ultimate appreciation that they knew they were going to eat every week. So yeah, you know, we're trying to make the best of it, of course. And as far as the day-to-day here at the farm with our workers, we are very careful to keep everyone well protected. And of course, everyone's eating very well and is physically active and outdoors. We don't have an indoor packing house. Unfortunately, you know, much of those agricultural situations where COVID has just gone raging through communities is often either in worker housing situations or in indoor packing houses. And we don't have either of those here. So we've been fortunate that no one on our team has personally had that health issue. But yeah, you know, we're dealing with all the things that other small business people would have, which is that our workers' kids are in many cases at home or they're in school in unusual situations. And we've always been a community-focused farm. And I do think that there are terrible parts of this pandemic, of course, but if there's any silver lining, it is the opportunity to reset. And so, yeah, what this group is doing is just a wonderful place to pick up and carry the light forward.
Thank you. Awesome answer. I love that. We have some really great questions in the chat. This question is about what is the problem of using groundwater for gardening?
Well, it depends on where you are. So in general, groundwater, well water either stinks or stains. It's either high in iron or sulfur. And it's high in iron, it can clog drip lines over time. But in general, it's hard. So it's going to clog drip lines regardless if it stinks or stains. So that's one issue. I know there are some areas, coastal Southwest Florida, where there's saltwater intrusion. Mostly I'm thinking of Pine Island. So those are issues. But in general, because of the recharge, we get roughly on average 55 inches of rain every year. We can sustainably use groundwater to put in regenerative systems here. It is good, though, to have other backup elements, whether you're harvesting rainwater, if you have a pond. I got a 200-gallon galvanized stock tank, you know, one of those troughs that are for feeding animals that I have a little aquaculture system in, and that's a great backup in case the well doesn't work. So it's always good to have backups when it comes to water. Very important.
Great. I have another question that came to me. Eva or any of you, do you know of any legislative efforts to pay regenerative farmers for the ecological benefits of their farming, such as sequestering carbon? How important would that be for regenerative farmers, organic farmers? Is there any kind of support from our government?
Right. Not really. Not from local or state or federal government at this time, but possibly in the future that may be recognized and incentivized. What you do have is there are some people doing like carbon credit trading, and usually the farms that are identified for that have a whole lot of high paid people working for them. They're more like corporate farms. I mean, they might be private corporate, but they're not mom and pop type operations. So they usually also already have access to capital, and they have larger acreages, and it's an order that's somewhat, I mean, that could be important for large scale operations, but not necessarily. I'm thinking of the ones around here. Maybe some of the cattle ranches would qualify for that sort of thing in Southwest Florida, but that isn't necessarily something that has to occur on a local level. So when you have, like in the state of Florida, what people consider in real estate to be the highest and best use of land, it's of course skyscrapers, which as an organic farmer, I don't think of it that way. And I doubt anyone here does. There's a place for skyscrapers for sure, but not everywhere. So I do see where the economic choices at the household level and at the small institutional level for supporting small farms, and not just small ones, but also just regional farms that are engaged with community. They can be large as long as they're thinking at the granular level as well, and what the impact of all of their management approaches would be on the water and the air and the land and the people and the organisms, and on an ecosystem level. So yeah, that really, the government is one possibility, but we all can make decisions on an individual and organizational level that can have a pretty significant impact as well.
All right. I see some interesting comments in the chat. Wynn Everham made a comment, and I'm wondering if you want to just take a couple of minutes to elaborate on there being precedent for soil conservation efforts.
I'll do it quick. It's just that we have a history in the country of supporting agriculture, and this is just another opportunity to support these efforts in a new way. So after the Dust Bowl, a lot of support for changing agricultural practices to maintain the quality of topsoil. I think it's a natural bridge to the much deeper, richer, more thorough things that you guys have been talking about today.
Yeah, and we certainly can advocate for that. With the call that I was on with the House committee members, I made the point that we really need to have like the NRCS type programs and the Soil Conservation Service, and whatever that evolves into. They often have a weighting system that is based on the number of different things that people decide they're going to do. So you can't just plant cover crops. You also have to do, 5 other things. And in many cases, an operation isn't in a position to do all of that because maybe they don't own the equipment, or maybe their cropping system isn't well suited for that. And so, yeah, just trying to create programs that do incentivize, but that are accessible to the reality of the management systems that, we want to encourage.
Thank you very much, Eva. So many knowledgeable and committed people on this call. Growing food, food distribution, reducing food waste, these are all drawdown solutions. These are all different ways we can take care of ourselves, self-care, take care of each other, and work to reverse global warming. So with that being said, I think I want to turn this over now to our Vice President, Gary Robbins.
Thank you so much, Holly. And I am Gary Robbins, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to sort of wind things up for us here today. But I want you to know that I'm hoping that this is just the first time we are with you, or the second if you were in on our earlier Zoom conference. And to let you know that one of the things that we were just talking about was the involvement of people in democracy, in a sense. And our work with rights of nature is very closely associated with the issue of democracy. We've got to work, as represented by the fact that we worked with folks in Orange County, and they passed their rights of nature amendment by over 89% of the popular vote. Just blows us away. And it's that kind of support that we can generate that will change the way that we operate in so many ways in our society. And drawdown is one of the ways in which we are trying to change things in our society. It's a whole book of solutions. And if you are not acquainted with it or you don't have your personal copy of it, we still do have several copies available for distribution. So you can let us know and we'd be happy to provide a copy of it for you. It's 100 different solutions to global warming. So we'd be happy to share that with you. I wrote a few comments and I guess I'll just quickly run through them. But no matter who you are or no matter how you got here, we want you to join the Reset Center in our challenging work. We have committed ourselves to creating a groundswell of evolutionary activists right here in Southwest Florida to work on the ever-vexing problems we face in building mutually enhancing human-nature relationships. We are called to not only dream a new future, but to actually create a new, vibrant, environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just human presence right here in Southwest Florida. We are not the first to have such a dream, and goodness knows it's our fervent hope that we are so successful that we will not be the last to have that dream. You come to us today with great interest and you come with your own special history and knowledge and gifts. And we count on your having been stimulated today with new insights and connections. Please be even further enlivened by them. The goal of knowledge and skill and wisdom is to put them all into action and to make a difference. In other words, we need to make sure that each one of us, stimulated by things like today's program, embody them to create the lasting positive social change that we desire. And so in part, what we want to do is we have a fervent wish that together we can amplify your priorities and your activities. And you know people in the community that we have not ever met, and people who have priorities that are so positive for our society. We want to have you bring them into Reset and work with you and with them. So what I would like to do is I'd like to thank Peter and Sean and Eva and Alex and Milissa for your presentations today. As Thoreau said, there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil for everyone striking at the roots. Reset is about striking at the roots so that we can create the kind of society that we all know is possible. And we welcome you into Reset. We look forward to working further with you. And please do stay in touch. Let us know how we can be helpful to you and how we can work together to bring about those dreams that we have for our society, to be socially just and to be spiritually fulfilling and certainly to be environmentally sustainable. Thank you ever so much. Bless you all.